my pleasure to introduce Chief Dunna'eh, Richard Mclean, normally known as Rick. He was born in Cassiar, BC, and raised in the remote community of Dease Lake in northwestern BC. He learned the ways of his ancestors from his grandfather and uncles, which led to 35 years working in the guide outfitting industry. Rick's passion for the land and its wildlife then led him to start the Tahltan Wildlife Guardian Program in 2002 and the Tahltan Guides Association in 2005. His leadership in the community was acknowledged, and in 2008 he was elected chief of the 2,000-member Tahltan Band. When wildfires devastated the Tahltan community of Telegraph Creek, burning a third of the community down. Called the worst disaster of its kind by the federal government, Rick is proud to say that it has also been acknowledged as the fastest recovery ever from a natural disaster in the province of BC. The resiliency and drive of the Tahltan Nation continues as Rick and the Tahltan leadership recently received an award from Clean Energy BC for their $125 million equity buy-in to the Northwest Hydro projects this year. Co-presenting with Rick is Feddie Louie, who was also born in Cassiar, BC, and has lived all her life in Tahltan territory. She works for the band administration as the capital projects manager and has been in band administration for the past 35 years. During 2018, she acted as EOC director in the Tahltan EOC located in Dease Lake, assisting in managing the response to, or directing the managing response to the fires in Telegraph Creek. And now, in addition to her title as Capital Project Manager, she has been appointed the head of recovery and rebuilding operations for the Tahltan Nation. Without any further ado, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Coast Salish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam and Squamish Nations, where they're graciously hosting us here for this wonderful conference, and it's so good to see so many people here. The Alkali Lake fire changed our lives. Oh, I gotta do two here. Oh, and trick or treat, by the way. So July 31st, our weather conditions in Telegraph Creek were extremely hot and dry. We had a lightning storm with very little moisture in it. And in the Northwest Fire Center, I think that night there was 400 lightning strikes in that region. So it stretched the response IA crews very thin very quickly. Just looking at these pictures, just brings back the feeling of anxiety for sure. But our crews on the ground, the IA crew was a three-man crew that responded to the fire. It went from half an hectare to 6 hectares in a matter of hours, 3 hectares, 6 hectares, and quickly it was out of control pretty much from the time the lightning struck. The area where the fire started was hard to get to on foot. It was only 6 kilometers from the community, but the terrain in there was rocky and hilly, and just getting the guys, the three-man crew there on foot, it was deemed out of control very quickly. They needed to call for helicopter support, but helicopters were being stretched very thin at that time, so resources were hard to come by. As we quickly worked and had very close conversations with Wildfire BC and Regional District issuing evacuation alerts and orders and learning the difference and trying to mitigate that through our community and making sure everybody understand how they work in conjunction with one another. took a little bit of time. It did actually, we split the town of Telegraph into two regions, two zones. So the zone down the road, the Sawmill Lake Road, was the first zone to get alerted and ordered, and then it moved in. That gave us time to get the community prepped for its own alert and order. And well before we put the community on alert and on order, our frontline teams were already moving the most vulnerable people out of the community. And basically kept essential services and crews there until the last, when we finally left the community with that behind us. That night, the fire come at us from pretty much 3 sides. There was, it burned right through the community. So I'm actually surprised that we didn't have more loss of structures and have total loss. I just don't know how that did not happen. With those 4 fires converging together, we lost 120,000 hectares of forest. A lot of that area was the road to Telegraph Creek, which is our only way in and out, and it created many challenges for firefighting crews and efforts to battle a fire in Telegraph. There was daily road closures, fire was trees falling on the roads, there was just so much smoke and really hampered the firefight efforts early on. And our guys traveling back and forth, it put a lot of long days into getting back home every night, getting back to Dease Lake, and then going doing it again the next day. We quickly found out and learned EOC 101. And with the great help of Emergency Management BC, we were able to open an office in Dease and house our EOC, but we also housed the Tahltan Band, the regional district, EMBC. We all converged and worked in the same office. I think that was a key piece of coordinated collaboration. Our days started every day with a circle, and everybody sat down and we had a little bit of chat to see where everybody's at, how you're feeling, what are the tasks at hand that we need to deal with each day. So it wasn't like we had to go across town to another office or anything like that. We were all in the same room all the time. And I think that was a key piece of our success moving ahead and throughout the whole ordeal. August 13th, we were able to start getting back into the community and start assessing the damage. The assessments were another new learning curve on what we did. We lost power to our pumping system, so our water tower, it was a gravity feed system, so we pumped directly from the creek surface water into the water tower to keep our hydrants running throughout the community, which contaminated the whole system. So we had to do a whole water assessment and flush and clean that whole system, which took a lot of work and effort. And trying to make our community livable again, with losing our nursing residents, with damage to the RCMP houses. There was our store being total. So a lot of things before you can get people back into the community. A lot of work, a lot of pressures on us to get people home quickly. And people just wanted to get home, and having to continually explain the level of work that has to go in before making it safe and livable again was a daily task. And with a lot of good people and good help, we were able to convey that to our membership. we had to also convey that to Ministry of Transportation, who wanted to open our road to Telegraph. We're in the business of keeping roads open. We were trying to keep it closed as long as possible because of the danger in the community. It was a work zone. It was just hard, so we had to really work hard with MOT to make sure that we could keep that road closure in place as long as possible. And thanks to our friends at Regional District and whatnot, keeping that pressure on MOT to help us with that was a challenge, but we were able to keep a radio maintained work zone road for quite some time. But as you can see on the list there's so many things that needed to be assessed and looked at. Like I said, our water system was a big one. Hydro came in. In fact, I was really pleased with the response from Hydro, who came in and redid pretty much our entire line system. And the good thing about that was when we were talking about them going in to fix it, was they had a bunch of work slated for the year already. So they just came in and did all of that stuff in one shot rather than just come and quick fix in and out. So they did a whole bunch of stuff really quickly and got the work done that they didn't have to come back. So there was getting power back was key, and they responded very well and worked with us to make that happen. The danger trees, the slopes, we started getting some rain later on, and slopes started giving away on the road. We have a unique road, I guess, in the province. It's 112 kilometers, but there's 3 or 4 20% grades and a lot of banks. And when you remove that root system, we found that rocks roll and mudslides happen very easily. When we were looking at the damage, the smoke damage, without realizing the impacts from houses built 30, 35 years ago, the amount of asbestos and other contaminants in the siding that really infiltrated the rest of the homes on the reserve. We had to clean them all. So the ones that weren't burnt got a huge cleaning. You couldn't believe the look of the insulation in the attics, just black. It was unbelievable. So we had to do all of those homes that weren't burnt. So it took a certain amount of coordination efforts with our insurance companies and cleaning company who came in to do those restorations. A lot of time, and we did not take the pressure off and made sure that they staffed up. We had to move a 100-man camp into Telegraph because there's no place to stay, so we put a camp in for the cleaning crew. And all of that takes time and effort, and we managed to get through it and get people back in their homes by Christmas. The fire never did get put out. It went out on its own. In fact, it burnt all winter in different areas. Those peat bogs, those dry swamps with the changing climate conditions in the world, all those little places that used to be swamps were dry, and that peat, it just burns down and burrows down into those peat bogs, and it was flaring up all winter long. It would be, well, after Christmas, we were still watching up on a mountain that there'd be trees candling up. So, and then into the spring, and we were very adamant with wildfire, and they responded very well, and we had a plan for those holdover fires, and they were on it as soon as we could in early May this year. So to make sure that it didn't get out of hand on us again. As you can see, there is a lot of down timber, and we're still watching and worried about a reburn. So all this stuff is still fresh in our memory. So as Minister Philpott had said, it's the most devastating wildfire to a First Nations community in Canadian history. And she also said it's the fastest recovery of a community, First Nation or non, in any disaster. So, but that's all done. and could only be done with good partnerships and relationships with everybody involved, the regional districts, the federal government, provincial government, emergency management, wildfire, our crews, our contractors, our insurance company. All of these things, when working together, can get great things done. And I'll invite Feddie up and she can talk about the response, the recovery, and where we're going into rebuild.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. Okay, a little bit about me, because everything I do in my life is about me. I have 35 years of community development experience. I started work quite a while ago when I was quite young, and I had the pleasure of working alongside a real visionary, innovative man by the name of Feddie Louie. So when you work with Louie, nothing is impossible. No is definitely a maybe. So when this fire happened, I was at home. And I don't live in the community of Telegraph Creek, I live in the community of Iskut, but I work for Telegraph Creek and Dease Lake. So I had a total of 8 days to stew, waiting for what was going to happen. So on August 9th, the chief finally called and said, "Do you want to be the EOC director?" I said, "What's an EOC?" "And what does a director do?" He said, "Well, I think they rebuild communities." I said, "Oh, I can do that. Sure, I'll be EOC director." I had no clue. So we went, and on August 13th, we opened the doors to the EOC. The first call I got was from ISK. They were going to come in tomorrow to do an assessment. It's like, what? You're coming to do what? Oh, we're bringing the engineer. So thankfully, I know who our engineer is. I got on the phone and say, "Hey, Simon, I need you up here tomorrow morning." And he goes, "What for?" And I says, "Well, you got to come in and do the assessment with this, because I want to make sure they don't miss anything, and we got to be on top of this." So it started. I started that day through the door, running full tilt, nonstop. And when I say nonstop, I mean even today. The leadership was great. You know, I sat down with them on day one, told them what the plan was, because I already had a plan. I had a plan in mind. I knew what the damage was, and I knew what needed to be done. I've built communities all my life. So I sat down with chief and council, and I said to them, resources are going to be an issue at the beginning, because bureaucracy moves really slow. But you have $3.5 million in the bank. Can I use it? I promise you'll get every penny back. It might take a little while, but I'll give it back to you. So they said yes, after I laid out my plan, and they were on board. And then I started calling partners. And EMBC was in the building, so I got EMBC 101 while I was doing all of this. RDKS was in the building, and we had, I'm going to say, if I could do life over again, that is the team I want to do life with, because everyone was open and trusting. And for those of you who don't know me, I love challenges. So with the chief beside me and the council behind me and my community out of their comfort zone. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I have 17 years as a health director. So my focus was really on the health of my community. And I put a calendar on the wall where we counted every single day they were out of community, and that's what we focused on. No's, if somebody said, "No, you can't do that," I'd say, "Well, not today." I had somebody come up to me when I had laid out the plan and put the timelines in. I knew they were tight. I knew I was pushing and pushing hard, But I had my partners on side. They were a little skeptical, but they trusted me. And the team I had did everything in their power to make sure our community went home as quickly as possible. I don't know if there was rules that I broke because I didn't listen to what rules were there. I just wanted to do things and do things my way and convinced everybody that was the way to do it. And pushed hard. Did I say push hard? Our own construction company almost lost a $1.5 million contract because they took too long. They were concerned about risk management, and I said, well, if you don't sign it by 3 o'clock, NAP is in Prince George and they're ready to come, so I'll get NAP. They signed. They got NAP. They brought NAP in. So one of the things I would never wish upon anyone is to have to do what we had to do in the location we're at. Our nearest large center is 520 kilometers away. So we had everyone who were interested or had to work in our area going through the EOC. We had meetings with RCMP. They had to hold the road for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the beginning because the fire was burning across the road to Telegraph Creek. We had the Ministry of Transportation and Highways scrambling to make sure that people on the other end of the community who were still in Glenora were able to have access out, but not on the highway. I don't know how they did that. In the end, with MOTI, we took over the control of that highway. So not only am I rebuilding a community, I'm managing a highway. But you had to. There were so many dangers, so many unknowns. And our entire community, although it was on reserve, was a construction zone. Day in, day out. The thing I said to our people is, we build mines 24 hours a day because we're a mining community. We have mines all around us. We can build community 24 hours a day. And that's what we did. So ISK did something that ISK normally does not do. And I learned yesterday we were the first community they ever did it for. They fronted, advanced $4 million without paperwork or anything. They sent the money to our bank. To get to the point we are today, we had spent in that little community $23.8 million. That is how much damage was done by that fire. And all the while, my focus was on our people. When Rick talks about having circles every morning, we do that so that our people who are on the front lines can stabilize for the day. They can let go what's on their mind and focus on what they need to do. And that was a daily routine. I didn't care if it took 10 minutes or 2 hours. I needed to hear from everyone who was working with me to make sure they were okay and they knew what they were going to do. A lot of times when we go through disasters, we focus on physical. Buildings, roads, fires, floods. Very seldom do you hear about the human side of things. PTSD is alive and well in my community. And one of our biggest investments is on the mental health side of things. We have a clinical team that comes in once a month, more often if needed. We have traditional healers that come in. We have community events. We invest quite a bit in the mental health side of things. When Rick talks about rebuilding or recovery, our focus was to make the community livable. I can't say we recovered. We had to make it livable. Our people needed to get home. I'd done quick research on the impacts on other communities that struggle with fires, and I was sure, I thought I knew everything I needed to know. I took care of the rodents, and there were lots of them. They went and got their country buddies to come into the community too. You know, squirrels, pack rats, mice, birds. The other things that people don't think about is managing waste. What do you do with the waste? We cleaned from top to bottom, inside and out, 112 units, housing units. All the soft furniture had to be discarded. All the insulation from the ceilings had to be pulled out and replaced. We had tons of waste, tons. I honestly can't tell you where it all went. It went somewhere because I don't see it. The burned out vehicles, the burned out snowmobiles, ATVs, stoves, you name it, littered the community. All of that had to be taken care of. We lost 27 units, 27 structures. 21 of them were homes. 15 permanent residents were homeless overnight. So in 146 days, we rebuilt we revitalized our water system. We brought in 9 new homes, modulars, but new nonetheless, to house the people who needed to be there. The ones who didn't have permanent homes and had summer homes moved back to their other residences. We currently have one family that is still technically homeless because they don't have a place to go home to in Telegraph, and we have to pay their rent to live outside. Just because it's an elder with a living with her granddaughter. Her granddaughter had small children, so they started school, and the grandma can't live on her own, so we had to accommodate them for the school year. And then we didn't get a residence that she could use that was able to deal with her handicap issues. So 2 weeks ago, we started rebuilding our homes. We have 9 homes being constructed right now. The foundations are done, and they're starting the basement walls this week. So I'm not sure what else to say. I just know that no is maybe, and make sure you have partnerships and relationships because they are the ones that came forward when we needed them. Yeah, I didn't use the slide because Chief Mclean wasn't manning it. There's a lot of pictures that I don't like seeing. But yes, we rebuilt our community in 146 days. Our people went home. The last family moved in on December 20th. The RCMP and health services were reinstated prior to communities coming home. Our little general store was devastated. It actually went bankrupt because of the fire. Its busiest and most money-making month is August, September, and it lost it. We managed to get it back, but it was a tough go. Capacity in our community is limited, so it was a really, I wouldn't say tough. It was a slow process to get people back in to where we were before. The good news is no lives were lost. There were no injuries. And downtown Telegraph is alive and well, yet it wasn't even, I don't even think it was smoke damaged. It's the old historic part of Telegraph Creek. It's the Hudson Bay Company old building. So I'm going to turn this back over to the chief to close out, but I know he didn't say this. 570 people were evacuated within 3 days. 3 days. From a community that is way out in the middle of nowhere. 360 of them are full-time year-round residents. So we had to accommodate, and my hat's off to ESS for taking care of that. The other thing we did, that I should mention that'll be helpful is we kept all our health and social services away from the EOC. They were set up in a separate building. They took care of the people wonderfully. And in the end, when we were doing the return to home, we hired caseworkers to deal specifically with families so that no one got left out, to make sure all their needs were taken care of. They each got assigned a list of families and people, and that's what they did, is how we coordinated the return. Lessons learned? Lots of lessons learned. Going by the number 23.8 million, it's probably cheaper to prevent than to rebuild. A little bit of investment around the community. I think a couple of fire breaks would have been useful because we lost most of our houses because of grass fires. The one thing that I think kind of really stuck with me the most was the fact that we never stopped to think about the safety of our community if there were a fire. So we had a huge 500-gallon propane tank explode right in the middle of our community because we didn't take the time to make sure it was safe. We didn't put it on a gravel bed or a cement base and didn't make sure it was maintained so that the safety valves were working properly. So that one took out our nursing residences, our daycare, probably 3 or 4 of the homes that were gone. So the other thing as a EOC director I wish I had was a resource list. Because I didn't have, other than the people who came with me, I didn't have a list of who to call or names or phone numbers or anything. So in our emergency management planning, that is going to be in there to the maximum. Telegraph Creek had a very, very good evacuation plan. It worked like clockwork. And my hat's off to Nancy Kwok for taking care of that. She's a nurse in charge and she led that evacuation. They had handheld radios. I think they had a dozen of them, and they coordinated a team to make sure that everybody in the community was accounted for. Keep in mind, it's the middle of, right at the height of fishing season. So they had a couple hundred extra people to take care of. The one that we always talk about and smile the most about is we had a party bus, because it's the middle of summer. We had our party people who partied outside, every one of them. All 21 of them were rounded up and put on a bus and taken out of the community. They just moved their party to wherever they ended up, I think it was. Didn't slow them down very much, but they had fun. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Chief.
Historically, we, as people who've lived on the land and off the land and with the land, our forefathers and grandfathers, we lit fires and burned off large sections of land for habitat enhancement and regrowth. A practice that wasn't done for many years, and suppression was the only key, which created this large fuel load that burned last summer. And in a way that it burned large tracts of land with extreme heat on the ground. Like the fire on the ground it burned so hot, it was just unbelievable. Burning in areas where deciduous trees, wildfires, oh yeah, it'll slow down here, we'll get it here, yeah, you're gonna get here while it's sped up. It almost like that. The pitch in those poplar stands acted like diesel fuel. So our historic wildfire or fire management tools that we used needs to be brought back into play and looked at moving ahead. I think in and around the province, I think this is a practice that needs to be looked at and done moving ahead, especially looking at our current norm of dry conditions. If we would have done a lot of work in and around the community, taking care of those fuel loads, I think we would have been a lot better off. But we got taught a lesson. So understanding the new norm, we have to plan, prepare, and conduct ourselves in ways that's what we have to do on a day-to-day basis, year-to-year basis. Land planning and working with other agencies on how that is done. Forest license holders are a big key, a big part in all of this. I know that we just took on our own forest license, and we'll be looking at how we manage and do proper forest planning in ways that wildfire is used and done to benefit the forest and protect our communities. I think our goal of cleaning up in and around, especially the remote communities in the province that have the forest out your back door. There are a lot of things that can be done to ensure that wildfire is prepared for. Our community teams, I know our fire departments are staffed and equipment supplied, but is it the right equipment? We found out very quickly that we didn't have the proper equipment in our fire department. Yeah, we had a fire truck built for the city of Vancouver, not the town of Telegraph Creek. I mean, it was with a 1,000-gallon water tank on the back. We'd quickly burnt out the transmission trying to get to different hotspots in the community. So having the right equipment for the right application is very important. You know, our fire department is stocked for fighting house fires when we should have had wildfire fighting gear on hand. Sprinkler systems, learning how to put up the sprinkler systems on house for structural protection. That type of equipment and training is desperately needed and need to be looked at throughout the province in all communities, especially the remote ones. Having access to firefighting gear, for example, the structural protection unit from wildfire is housed in Prince George. And Telegraph Creek, by the time they dispatched that fire structural protection unit to come to Telegraph Creek, it was almost 72 hours before they got there. The call was made, I think, on the 3rd or 2nd of August, but they never got there till like late on the 3rd. They got one 12-hour shift in putting up sprinklers. And we got evacuated at 11 o'clock that night. And so just, you know, it's such a vast area. We got to have some more of these supply equipment closer at hand, easier access. Prince George, although people say it's in the north, it's only halfway there. Getting our crews and our guys in the community, I know everybody wanted to run out there, and when I pulled into Telegraph, in fact, I was at a meeting with Feddie and doing nation planning stuff in Terrace when we got the fire call. And when I got home to Telegraph Creek, I had the community running out with the bucket brigade to go put out the fire, and had to quickly stifle that, and took a lot of heat for it, no pun intended. Because the lack of training and knowledge. Everybody wanted to run up there and put the fire out. Well, the fire was way out of control in an extremely volatile area, but our community wanted to run up there and fight it with no training, with no idea of what they're getting into. So having our communities and our people and our fire departments trained in wildfire, the S100 courses, all that stuff is important, and it has to be part of your local fire department's training, along with the proper rigging. Our EOC, as Feddie has talked about, a lot of these slides are what she said, but our success is in those partnerships. I quickly learned what happened in other parts of the area, the Tahltan, Burns Lake, those other fires, the lack of coordination between different agencies, the lack of communication from one hand to the other can create huge animosities and unwillingness to work together. So I think early on in preparing for these events, I think the coordination has to go into the municipalities, the regional districts, the First Nations, Wildfire, getting together on a regular basis to look at what each agency brings to the table, how you plan, what are your emergency plans, and how is that all going to roll out. I think for us, we've had a very strong relationship with regional district for a long time, and the province and feds were in the loop, and we made sure everybody was doing their share, and or get out of the way. But that's key: preparedness, partnerships, and planning. So those are my 3 Ps, and I think that the planning part, there's never enough planning. As Feddie stated, the cost of recovery, rebuild, response is far too great. There's more value in your dollar if you prepare, plan, and work together as a group, because those recovery dollars is just too astronomical. And communication. Our community meetings, I think we watched this happen, and we watched people leave the community and not take anything with them. Right? The shock, the initial, is this really happening? No, it's not going to burn. It's not going to burn the community. So we had a lot of people leave without anything. They lost everything. In fact, you sit there and we've had people sitting up there watching the fire when they could have been getting ready to go. A lot of backseat fire wardens out there too. But part of that planning and community preparedness needs to be done. So in every community, that basic list of stuff that you should have on hand, be ready to go, needs to be done. Because people, you just get in a state of shock and everybody get a blank stare on their face. So if we have some of these stuff in your planning and how you're going to evacuate and what you should take with you, I think is a key for having more preparedness done. I know our health staff was very good in making sure that people had their medications and who was on what, and then all that stuff ready to go. But as individuals, that community planning piece and that constant training, I guess, is the best way to put it, because when things don't happen for a while, you get complacent and kind of forget about what can happen. So being prepared and that planning piece is really key. And this summer we had Medu in our languages, thank you. We had a large thank you ceremony in Telegraph for our frontline workers, our firefighters, who stepped up to the plate and offered their skills, knowledge, and basically they've been on the go since then. One of the things that I'm noticing now that my top managers in in the community are starting to suffer from burnout. And the mental health aspect of it, we need to do more. It's because you only have so many people, right? Like I noticed when we had the EOC, they had shift changes coming from down south every 3-5 days. We had the same team all the way through. In fact, the same team's still going, right? So the foot never come off the gas. But you know what? That's my hats off to them who done above and beyond the call of duty. Because of them, we never lost a life. We never had an injury. Not one visit to the first aid attendant, which is pretty remarkable. So, you know, through that and those dedicated people and agencies, we've been fairly successful in dealing with the disaster. It's now our responsibility to share and help other communities prepare. We watch what's going on in California. My heart goes out to all those folks. And numbers of people and structures is just astronomical. So our success in dealing with this came from having a good team and good partnerships. And we're more than happy to share and answer questions and do what we can to make this new norm easier to deal with. And it's, like I said, our responsibility now. So I guess we're open for questions if that's how it works. Or I don't.